securing the realm, vibe coding with GitHub Copilot agent mode. Hi there, welcome to the first live recording of Securing the Realm from myself, Chris Lloyd-Jones.
And me, Josh McDonald.
So we've not tried this before. I just asked Josh before this call started if we'd become middle-aged, because I've heard about middle-aged people setting up a podcast.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's something that happens when you turn 40-ish, right? Based on current life expectancies anyway. That's what I'm holding out for.
But anyway, few years yet, but we're still trying to do some kind of video podcast. But today, we want to explore the latest agentic AI features from GitHub Copilot.
Yeah, that's right. So we want to look at the concept of what we had before around the tabletop board game that we created of Secure the Realm, SLM and LLM app that created the DM-less tabletop role-playing experience that we demonstrated before. And it's based on the open game license, but with the astronomic pace of change in the generative AI space and how you build generative AI applications, which has been significantly disrupted by the agentic ways of working and designing, it's already looking old. So it's time for a new lease of life in the newly discovered realm of agentia.
Yeah, so it's a bit ambitious, but we're going to try and rebuild the whole thing from scratch. We're going to see what could possibly go wrong with that. At the very least, you'll get to see how the new agentic features from GitHub Copilot work to give you a view on the updates that are coming.
Yeah, exactly. So whilst a good chunk of this is us just geeking out about, Dungeons and Dragons, etc., and AI, it is also a showcase and a demonstration of this concept around agents and agents being able to make agents. Remember that whole thing about 3D printing where you had self-replicating machines and how that was going to become a big revolutionary thing? Well, we're experiencing it again when it comes to AI and with agents producing agents. So using the GitHub Copilot agent mode, and which is also a great name. I love that. I think that could be called agent mode. I can switch on agent mode, and we're going to do that now, actually. But we'll also be using the open source semantic kernel agent framework as well by Microsoft.
Yeah, and there is a term that I absolutely hate that I've seen all over social media recently, which is vibe coding. I get what Andrej Karpathy was going for when he coined it, the idea that you can kind of just sit back and let AI do things. Hate it. Hate the term. But Aditya had a nice comic strip recently, which still don't love the term, but vibe engineering. The idea being that we've seen Cursor and GitHub Copilot to develop applications without being engineers. Silly things happen, like they delete their Git repositories, they don't back up their code, there's no security. So my perspective is we're in the era where to get the most out of AI tools, you need to be a subject matter expert. So that means if you want to use an AI tool or a Copilot to help you with reviewing a legal document, you will only get it right if you are a lawyer and you can sense check your own work. And in the same way, for you to get the most out of engineering with AI, you need to be a software engineer or at least have some idea of the basic principles. So that said, Josh and I have crafted some prompts. So over to you, Josh, to share your workspace, talk us through what we're going to do.
Yeah, great. And, I think that concept of what Chris was talking about with vibe engineering is pretty much bang on, because anyone who knows me knows that I like to say that I'm not an engineer. I'm just not. I mean, that's half true. I don't spend a lot of time coding, to be honest, but I feel quite familiar and comfortable with engineering concepts. Was driving forward DevOps some years ago now, relatively early on in my career, and had the pleasure of working with some great DevOps teams actually around that. So the ways of working I'm relatively comfortable with. So let's see if that helps me today. So we want to recreate tabletop gaming experience from scratch. So let's
see, you're in the Video Code Insiders version, and you've got Copilot chat version up. Is that the same version that other people will see if they've got Copilot?
Right. So, yeah, that's a good call out. So we're in the Insiders version, so that we're getting the latest shipment, essentially. And I've got my GitHub Copilot license. I've got the Insider version of GitHub Copilot, which you just download on the insider's VS Code. So there is a couple of subtle differences. So what we now have, remember I said agent mode, and that's what we've got. We've now got agent mode. And I'm not going to keep on saying it in that voice throughout this video. I just think it makes it a bit more exciting as a one-off. So we're going to use this agent mode. You'll notice that we've also got a choice of LLMs here as well. I think it's quite interesting now that we've moved away from just OpenAI models as that partnership, that exclusivity early on in the AI boom has kind of not parted ways, but has now kind of ended its exclusivity, meaning that Microsoft and OpenAI get to see other people and do business in that way. So Claude is what we've seen on some other IDEs. Like I said, other products are available. Claude is also seen in Cursor. So we're going to use that today. I think both of us have found good experience of using that model for code generation in the past. What do you make of the kind of model selections there, Chris?
So I've been really interested with the new model selections because Claude 3.7 Sonnet has an excellent quality when it comes to writing code. I've also used Cursor, which has some of the thinking reasoning modes enabled, but I quite like Copilot because there's no extra cost if you have the license, although there is some rate limiting if you're overusing it. Okay, so you've moved from ask mode to ask questions to agent mode. You've selected Claude 7 Sonnet, and you've written a prompt there, create a TypeScript web app that can be run locally. Are you going to ask it to use any particular framework, or are we just going to see what it goes ahead with?
Yeah, so I think for this, based on some of the discussions we've had in the past, especially around front-end choices, I'm going to use Next.js, with prompts, especially around this agentic code generation. Being explicit is what would be the difference between vibe coding and vibe engineering. So I'm not just going to say, make me an app that does Dungeons and Dragons. I'm going to say that we need a TypeScript web app. We're going to use Next.js using semantic kernel agents to create, to enable a tabletop role-playing experience based upon the open game license and the system reference document.
Okay, so you're going hardcore first of all in the first prompt, so we can see where it gets.
Yeah.
This could be us by the demo gods. Question 4. Are we going to try and use small language models like a llama, which we could run on your device, or are we going to try and use one of the large language models deployed to Azure AI Foundry?
It's a good question, but like you said, I've gone quite heavy. I've been very specific with some things, which are some key design choices in the first prompt. Let's roll the dice. Obviously, we don't necessarily have inside knowledge here of what it's doing, but how do you think this is working agentically, if you like?
So we can see a couple of things. We can see that it's generating a plan to create a new workspace. So I'd expect there to be some kind of planning agent. And again, I don't work for GitHub or Microsoft. This is my own assumption. It's getting setup information. We've got a prompt, and it's identifying the right command to run. It's then running that in the terminal, and we can see that running in the terminal. And the agent will get the output of that command as well. So we can see that there's been an error when it's running. The agent has identified the error and is going, okay, let's make a directory and let's try running it in there.
Yeah. This is something that I've, from trying out and demoing a couple of times now with agent mode, I found that sometimes it'll try to do quite a lot in those terminal commands, and then it'll go, oh, this isn't actually working for me, especially because you're a Windows user, and I'm going to make each directory one by one and run each piece an installation of each item one by one. And then it creates a problem and then resolves it itself. So that's okay, I guess.
Well, you're a Windows user. I'm a Mac user. So I love my Mac. Okay, so It looks like it's waiting for you to approve that.
Oh, you're right. I missed that in the command prompt. I was staring frantically.
So it's creating an next using create next app. It's using TypeScript. It's Tailwind for theming. It's going to install ESLint for linting even. And it's installing all the various different dev dependencies as well. Whilst it waited for your prompt, it answered all the other questions itself, setting up React. And I guess it's downloading all of the crazy amount of Node.js, JavaScript, and TypeScript libraries that those apps need. I am usually an Astro person. I prefer static web apps, but for prototyping, Next.js just kind of works.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things I've found is, I mean, it generally gets the dependencies right, and it knows, it knows how to start properly. It doesn't often have to come back like very late in and then realize it's missed half the dependencies and then goes back and gets it. But it does sometimes have a tendency to add a load of things that it doesn't necessarily end up using, depending on where you go with the app and the decisions you end up making. So, there's a user element to that as well. But what I quite like is that although we were very prescriptive with it, it still used some of its own kind of output, like the tailwind choice. So it's complementing someone who's able to be quite prescriptive, but also still being additive to your workflow with that as well, which is quite neat.
Nice.
So,
Okay.
got some installations going at the minute.
While that's going, I'm going to get back to the question around, are we going to use small language models or large language models? Because I do seriously use the keys.
That's a good point.
I also know that not being on a Mac, Alarm is going to kill your device.
Yes. Yeah. The laptop I'm running it on today might not be too friendly towards Llama and the pretty limited video card I've got in this thing. So maybe we go LLM today, unless, yeah.
Okay. So, bit of a cheat. Whilst you are deploying that, I am going to go into the Azure portal, into Azure AI Foundry, and I'm going to deploy a large language model that we can use for the purposes of this demo.
That's great. And then we can do some wizardries that we don't do. Really bad practices like showing keys publicly on a video broadcast.
So I can see the agent's finally finished setting up the TypeScript app. What are we going to go and do now?
Wow. So now what we need to do is, well, what it thinks we need to do is get set up with semantic kernel and get that set up so that it hopefully maybe it wants to pull these two things together. So perhaps we let it run that, do you think, as well?
Yeah, good to me.
Yeah, great. Yeah, do keep an eye on what it's actually saying to you, both in the terminal. Like I said, I missed that little prompt in the terminal, and also in the chat. Don't just let it blindly execute whatever it says in your terminal. I mean, it definitely happens, but don't. So right now it's getting the semantic kernel set up. It's noticed again a couple of gaps in how it's trying to get that installed. And it's found its workaround.
Perfect. And then in the meantime, I've got a model deployed for securing the realm from our talk that we did in Aberdeen. So I'll use that same endpoint and key and then regenerate it after we've run this session. So we're checking around a lot of terms. So just for folks that may not be familiar, Llama is an application that lets you download and run small language models on your local machine, and it's compatible with the OpenAI APIs, so you can do development locally. Then Azure AI Foundry is Microsoft service for deploying software, specifically models, into the Azure cloud, and you can then use semantic kernel or OpenAI to run those models. It's a really easy way to run models in bulk. Now, what's going on here? Saw a couple of issues go by whilst we were chatting.
Yeah, that's one of the things we talked about a bit earlier happening again, where it tries to make all these directories all at once, realizes the command terminal isn't liking that, and then goes, okay, I'll do it one by one. So now it's just going through and setting up all the libraries that we're going to need and getting the directory structure right. So you can see it's kind of setting something up for models. It's got a place for the different agents that we're going to use. We haven't actually told it which agents we want to create yet. What I imagine it will do is that it should just create one agent that is kind of, it's got semantic kernel deployed and all that great stuff, but it's probably a bit standalone, bit of an everyman agent, not the kind of specialist task performer that we tend to see, but that's very easily
I am
remediated.
impressed, actually. I don't know if you've noticed, but it's just if you open up the lib folder on the left side in the directory, it's also created a system reference document folder. So it is very much D part of the prompt which you specified, which is very cool.
That's a good catch there, actually. Yeah, SRD.
Ongoing, I can see that Copilot's continuing to iterate. So that's one thing to make sure that you don't just tick something off and use up all of GitHub's compute, because this is being run by GitHub. It does periodically ask you just to confirm what you're doing.
Yeah. It's the "Are you still there?" but the coder edition. Right.
So it's now
Okay.
just 4 models for our RPG system. Okay, that's kind of cool. Still doing quite a
Here we go.
but this is crazy. From that one prompt, we've got so much.
Yeah. The code and the magic begins now. I mean, not only has it kind of came up with the design, set up the directories for that design, cool, making directories isn't actually the code, but it is demonstrating some thinking there that this is the structure that makes sense. And away we go. It's setting up all the code. It's defined a hell of a lot already. And it's still going.
So it's telling you what it's doing as well. It's saying it's creating a core component of the tabletop, character class model, the ability to generate skills, proficiencies, character classes, features. It does look like the output has cut off halfway through, but I can see it's still running because you can see it's still got the little stop button at the top right. So we're still powering.
There we go.
We are creating a dice rolling utility, kind of cool, and creating the game session on the overall game state. So I guess at the end of this, once it's built it, we will wait for it to finish, and then we'll do npm run dev, and we can just have a look and see what's been built so far.
Yeah. I think one of the things I've found is, I guess you can make an app with a single prompt now, which is completely different to what we saw like a year ago, or even less, really, or even in the current prevailing GA version of this product. It's unreal how much it's changed. But whilst you can build that app with a single prompt, you probably will want to iterate, work with the agents again to make another pass through. And there's probably some things that you'll find it doesn't do as well as a person, or at least at the same speed as a person, or with higher margin of error.
We'll probably also need to check in all of these files, do a checkpoint after the finally finishes, and just to make sure that we have that we don't lose anything when the next agent runs. Because one thing I find about the AI is it's very good at creating new features and functionality, but it's a bit rogue towards the existing features and functionality. It's willing to just wipe whole files if it thinks they're no longer needed and not directly related to your prompt, which isn't what you'd want in production.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of one of those ways of working that is probably a bit underrated of, the version control.
Underrated.
And also be able to...
but I get your point.
Well, yeah, you also need to be able to readily do rollbacks for things like this as well. Okay, so I'm not just going to scroll through and ignore what it said there. But, it says it's defined the character model, the dice, tracking the concept of a game session, which I guess, I would call a campaign, or at least a session, I guess, like it said. It's actually gone ahead based upon what we said about agents and at least defined the agents. We should go and have a look what it's done there. Of creating a dungeon master, NPCs, rules, story, and combat. That's a pretty reasonable way to do it. I made some scribbles earlier. And I said location, storytelling, characters, and some sort of ambience and background, a la that small language model you created. But that's probably a second phase.
And if you wanted to see that, you can look at the video of the previous talks, which we're uploading to our YouTube channel. So what's it saying at the bottom? Is it still ticking over? It is. Okay. So it's identifying the open game license. It's trying to pull in the core game rules. Be interesting to see how much it can actually do that if it knows the rules already.
Yeah. It's really taken interest in the system reference document. And the fact we said tabletop role playing, that's a very broad topic, but then making reference to OGL, which is, of course, an open source reference in itself, even though it relates to, games, often outside of a...
Anyone else unfamiliar? The longest I've ever seen a GitHub Copilot prompt is ticking over. It's quite crazy. So, Josh, if you want to go into the SRD folder and open up the core rule file, it does seem like it has generated TypeScript rules based upon the open game license and system reference document already. It's got the different types of abilities. A little bit further down at around line 60, it's got the combat rules. It has character advancement. It does seem like, based upon the data which has previously been ingested, Claude is very familiar with the rules of D&D.
Yeah. And for those that know a bit about D&D or played similar kind of tabletop role-playing games, this looks pretty spot on. Like, even mathematically, these bits about the modifiers, they correct the game. The concept of structuring your difficulty challenges, your DCs, across these scorings, that's exactly what it says to do. It seems to have pretty much systematized the system reference document. And although it's an open standard, it is basically a PDF on a GitHub, really. So it's great that it's kind of taking this on board and looks at the key structure. Might have to come back to this because this is kind of just some fundamentals of characters. It doesn't tell you how like a fight might take place or something like that. But this is amazing. This is a lot for a single prompt, like you said.
I hope it finishes soon, to be quite honest with you, because we're coming up to the 25-minute mark. I know we wanted to cap these off. It's kind of crazy. It's running ahead, and then we'll run it. We'll look at we'll add the OpenAI key if we can, and then wrap up ready for the next.
Yeah. Okay. So what we got? Here we go. This is starting to look promising. Still working. Okay. So
we're done. So it's built the foundation. It's built the models, the semantic kernel agents, the API endpoints, and it's got a web app ready to run. It does need an open API key. We've got a ton of files here. If you click done, we've checked in the code, and I can see it needs to set up an OpenAI AI key. So if you hit done,
there we go.
Okay, so I can see we've got a ton of files here that we checked in. The one last thing we need to do is change this to use the Azure OpenAI service. So let's modify the application and ask it to use the Azure OpenAI service so we can use an Azure OpenAI key and endpoint. Okay, so we've got a ton of files here that we've checked in. The only thing I can see remaining is it's built it using semantic kernel and OpenAI. So let's ask it to rewrite this. We're using Azure OpenAI and to create a .env file to add our endpoint and our key and our model to. And we'll need the model deployment in a .env file as well. So let's see how it does it. So it's opening the agent service, it's looking at the configuration, and it's looking at the implementation. So it needs different endpoint formatting for Azure OpenAI, and it looks like it's going through to apply all of the edits. Nice.
So by doing this, it's also showing us where it's holding the endpoint details in this agent service that's created. There we go. It's now gave us the chance to then put it in there. So what we're going to want to do is actually get it to create a .env file.
The model deployment.
A model deployment.
Yeah, because the name and deployment can be different. Cool. And then I should be able to edit a .env file from here, and then we can try running it.
Okay, so now it's gone and created that file. Okay. Going back to the agent service again.
I'm going to use GPT-4o Mini for all of the deployments, just for speed, really, just so we can test this out. In a real production environment, which this definitely isn't, you probably want different models for different agent types, depending what it is that you're trying to do. For example, some might require higher fidelity or speed than others.
Yeah, absolutely. We used the 4.0 for the original version of Secure the Realm as well, so I feel pretty comfortable that will work, barring, of course, where we used the ambient small language model. Okay,
right,
here we go.
Let's do npm run dev.
Yeah, this will cause a bit of an update.
Okay, so Next.js is running, everything's starting. I can't see if it's looking good yet, but it looks like there's no errors so far. That's good news.
Yeah, so what I think we should do now is jump to another window
Mm-hmm.
and actually see it happening. So I'm just going to change share screen in private.
I've got my fingers crossed.
Yeah, here we go. Come on.
So I can see it's compiling. It looks like it's compiled. Oh, there we go. Setting up your adventure. Oh,
It's alive.
Okay. Okay, let's go back to VS Code and fix the final error.
Yes. Okay. So we change back again to our VS Code.
So I would select the entirety of the errors that we've had and just paste them into Copilot and say, fix this, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's now give it the task of debugging. So we're going to do this in the same chat so it keeps all the context, doesn't have to reevaluate without kind of restating it. Okay. Let's see how it goes.
Okay. So it's identified from the errors that you pasted some of the errors. It's looking at the packages and classes. And it's ticking over. It's updating it all. Great. Let's hit keep and let's try it again. We probably don't need to do that.
Yeah, possibly didn't for that type of change. Let's run it again now. And let's go back to that screen share.
Perfect.
Go where we left off, that error, but we've not refreshed yet. So let's give that a go.
So we saw my look of happiness before. Premature. Let's see if it's working now.
I mean, it was showing a pretty good job with the front end at the very least before that happened. Still working.
Adventure. Okay, still some issues. Well, let's pause it for there. Let's go and fix it, and we'll record a separate demo follow-up. So you can see this is why you do need to be a Vibe engineer.
Yeah, definitely not just a Vibe coder for this one. But yeah, we can debug this. We'll work on it.
Okay, well, we will go and fix that and then do a short follow-up to show it all working. Catch you in a bit.
Bye for now.